Welcome to this Jing presentation. The purpose of this presentation is to give you an overview of the performance writing assessment assignment, in which you'll write 2 assessments, and then also to provide 2 examples that you can take a look at. Our basic model is a 5-part process that starts off with an outcome or outcomes, and then performance criteria, performance process, performance judgment, and then a performance feedback. This model is one that I've created. I've had a chance to do some writing about, some speaking about, and then using it in my own work as well too. The process starts off with you identifying 1 or more outcomes, SLOs, that you'll be addressing in a given performance assessment. I do think that if you can include multiple SLOs, I think it's smart. And it also helps you obviously deal with more objectives you've got for a unit of study. Here you're going to be listing them by number, 1.1 for example, or 1.7 or whatever it happens to be. Then you'll have what we call the performance criteria, which is the indicators of success. This is where you'll be listing out the criteria that you will use to judge the work that the students have done. And typically you'll have anywhere from maybe 3 to 6 or 7 different criteria that would be listed here. And then we have the performance process. That's really what the student will be doing. That can be written out in narrative form, or sometimes it works better to put it in list form as well too. The next 2 parts of the process are the judgment, and that's where you'll be talking about how the process will be judged and by whom. And then you'll have the performance feedback. That's where you tell how the feedback will be provided to the student. Both of these sections tend to be fairly brief. Let's take a look at a little more detail now. What I've prepared for you is a description of each part of the process now. So what you have is a description of the purpose, and then also writing guidelines for it. Again, with the performance criteria, we have a description of what the purpose of that part is, and then also guidelines. And these will be important to look at as you're preparing your performance assessments. For the performance process then, again, we have a purpose, we have some guidelines, and then I've given some different options, some things that you might want to consider. The same thing holds true with the performance judgment. Purpose, guidelines, I've got some who options, some how options, some examples that would be there too. You'll want to take more time to look at this part of the document. Then the performance feedback, which is really the last part of the process. Again, you can see we followed the same pattern, and then I've listed some options for you as well. In terms of our samples then, we've got 2. This first one, you can see we've got the SLO written out in proper form. Starts with capital letter, ends with an S, ends with a period, and we've got the SLO identified. In this case, it's just 1 SLO that we're working with. We've got the criteria then. This is what the student and what the teacher would use to tell if the student's been successful with it. We have a very simple performance process. It's just a narrative listing of what the student's going to do. It's written right to the student, in language that they can understand. And then we have the performance judgment. In this case, we've got a numerical rating, very, very simple, and a performance feedback, which is really typically quite brief. Our second example then, this one includes just 1 SLO again, only 3 criteria, and this student decided they were going to write it out in list form. Like I said, sometimes that's easier for students to follow. So that's an option for you. And then the performance judgment, this one happens to be more of a holistic rubric, which would be certainly one way to do it as well too. And then we've just got information about the performance feedback. So those are 2 different examples. When you work on this assignment, I've provided 10 different sample performance assessments. So those would be, I think, very helpful to look at. They're all a little bit different in some ways. But if you'll notice in the assignment, I do ask you when you do your writing of the performance judgment to really come at that in 2 different ways. So please keep that in mind as you do it. Okay, thanks for listening.